Hold on to your seats, baseball fans, because what I'm about to tell you is going to blow your mind and potentially change the entire landscape of Major League Baseball as we know it. The Los Angeles Dodgers, fresh off back-to-back World Series championships, are not sitting back and resting on their laurels. No, no, no. According to multiple sources close to the organization, they're preparing to drop an absolute bombshell that will have every general manager in baseball scrambling to their phones, every agent licking their chops, and every fan base either celebrating or panicking depending on which uniform they root for. We're talking about Fernando Tatis Jr., the electrifying, gravity-defying, jaw-dropping superstar shortstop from the San Diego Padres. And the Dodgers aren't just kicking the tires or making polite inquiries. They're reportedly preparing what insiders are calling a mega offer, the kind of contract proposal that only comes around once in a generation, the type of deal that rewrites record books and fundamentally alters the competitive balance of an entire sport. But before we dive deep into this absolute tsunami of a story, we need to talk about something else that's been bubbling under the surface in Dodgerland, something that might actually be connected to this Tatis pursuit in ways that will become crystal clear as we unpack this entire situation. We're talking about Teoscar Hernandez and the suddenly very real possibility that he could be on the move. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why are we talking about Teoscar when we just dropped the Tatis bomb on you? Because in baseball, nothing happens in isolation. Every move is connected. Every trade creates ripples. Every contract affects what comes next. And understanding the Teoscar situation is absolutely essential to understanding how the Dodgers could possibly pull off a move for Fernando Tatis Jr. So stay with me here, because by the time we're done, you're going to see exactly how all these pieces fit together like the most beautiful, complex puzzle you've ever witnessed. Let's start with Teoscar Hernandez, a name that absolutely nobody expected to hear in trade rumors this offseason. This is a guy who just helped the Dodgers win a World Series. This is a player who smashed 25 home runs and drove in 89 runs last season. This is someone who has been a solid contributor and a respected clubhouse presence for 2 consecutive championship seasons. And yet, here we are talking about the very real possibility that he could be wearing a different uniform when spring training rolls around. The report surfaced seemingly out of nowhere, catching most fans completely off guard. One day, Teoscar is a Dodger through and through. The next day, his name is popping up in trade discussions with multiple teams. For a lot of people, this felt like it came completely out of left field, and the pun is absolutely intended there. But when you really dig into the details, when you examine the Dodgers' roster construction and their long-term strategic vision, this suddenly starts to make a whole lot more sense. Here's the reality that the Dodgers front office has to grapple with. Teoscar Hernandez, as valuable as his bat is, presents some significant challenges defensively. We all watched it happen throughout last season. The struggles tracking fly balls in the outfield, the occasional misread, the limitations in range that come with being a 33-year-old outfielder who has accumulated a lot of mileage on those legs. These aren't criticisms meant to tear down a player who has given everything for this organization. These are just facts, cold, hard baseball realities that every front office has to evaluate when making roster decisions. The defensive limitations create a domino effect across the entire roster. Normally, when you have a player whose defense has declined but whose bat still plays at a high level, you slide him into the designated hitter spot and let him focus purely on offense. Problem solved, right? Except the Dodgers have Shohei Ohtani locked in at DH, and that's not changing anytime soon. Ohtani is going to be the full-time designated hitter while he recovers and eventually transitions back to his two-way role. That spot is occupied, which means Teoscar has to play in the field. The Dodgers have been looking at left field as his primary position, but even there, the fit isn't perfect. The roster is already stacked with outfield options, and when you factor in the need to get playing time for younger players and maintain defensive excellence across the board, suddenly Teoscar becomes a complicated puzzle piece. His bat is undeniably valuable. His presence in the clubhouse is appreciated. But from a pure roster construction standpoint, the Dodgers have to ask themselves a difficult question. Is there a way to maximize value here that benefits everyone involved? This is where teams like the Boston Red Sox enter the conversation. Boston has been trying to beef up their lineup with consistent right-handed power, and Teoscar fits that profile perfectly. The Red Sox are primarily a left-handed hitting team, and adding someone like Hernandez would provide much-needed balance. They have roster flexibility that would allow them to use him at DH occasionally while still getting some innings from him in the outfield. They're not expecting Gold Glove defense at this stage of his career. They just want that proven bat in the middle of their lineup, someone who can drive in runs and provide veteran leadership. For the Dodgers, any trade involving Teoscar would have to accomplish multiple objectives. First and foremost, they would need to get back significant value, whether that's in the form of controllable young talent, prospects who can contribute soon, or major league-ready players who can step in and fill immediate needs. You don't just give away a player of Teoscar's caliber without getting something substantial in return. Second, they would need to replace his production somehow. That means either acquiring other outfielders through trades or free agency, or having enough confidence in players already within the organization to step up and fill that void. This is where the chess match really begins. If the Dodgers are serious about pursuing Fernando Tatis Jr., and all indications suggest they absolutely are, then they need to create both financial flexibility and roster space. Trading Teoscar Hernandez accomplishes both of those objectives. His contract, while not massive by today's standards, represents real money that could be reallocated toward a mega deal for someone like Tatis. And moving him opens up playing time and roster spots that make adding another superstar more feasible from a practical standpoint. But let's talk about the emotional component here, because it matters. Teoscar Hernandez isn't just a name on a depth chart or a line in a spreadsheet. He's a human being who has poured his heart and soul into this organization. He's a player that fans have grown to love and appreciate. He's been part of championship celebrations and iconic moments. Trading him would sting for a lot of people, and the front office knows that. This is where Andrew Friedman and the Dodgers decision-makers have to balance cold, analytical roster evaluation with the human element of the game. The reality is that championship organizations have to make tough decisions. They have to be willing to move popular players if it means improving the overall roster. They have to think long-term while still competing in the present. And they have to be honest about what each player brings to the table and where the limitations might create problems down the road. Teoscar Hernandez has been fantastic for the Dodgers, but if there's an opportunity to upgrade, to add someone even more impactful, then the front office has an obligation to explore that possibility. Now, let's shift gears and talk about the elephant in the room, or should I say the superstar shortstop who might be about to become a Dodger. Fernando Tatis Jr. is one of the most exciting players in all of baseball, and that's not hyperbole. This is a guy who combines elite power, blazing speed, incredible athleticism, and a flair for the dramatic that makes every at-bat must-watch television. When he's healthy and at his best, there might not be a more dynamic player in the entire sport. The whispers about the Dodgers' interest in Tatis have been growing louder for weeks now. What started as quiet murmurs among agents and front office executives has escalated into full-blown speculation that the Dodgers are preparing an offer that could be unprecedented in scale. We're talking about a contract that would potentially reset the market at the shortstop position, a deal that could rival or exceed some of the biggest contracts in baseball history. The financial commitment alone would be staggering, but the Dodgers have shown time and time again that they're willing to spend whatever it takes to build a championship roster. According to sources close to the situation, and let me emphasize that nothing has been officially confirmed yet, the Dodgers' offer could include complex arrangements that go way beyond a standard contract. We're talking about potential incentives tied to performance milestones, awards, and team success. We're talking about possible extensions that would keep Tatis in Los Angeles well into his 30s. We're talking about clauses and provisions that would make this one of the most intricate deals ever negotiated in professional sports. But here's where it gets really interesting. How exactly would the Dodgers pull this off? They already have Mookie Betts, who moved from right field to shortstop and has been fantastic at the position. They have Freddie Freeman anchoring first base. They have Shohei Ohtani in the lineup. They're paying Will Smith behind the plate. The roster is already loaded with expensive elite talent. So where does Tatis fit, and how do they make the money work? This is where that Teoscar Hernandez trade becomes even more relevant. If the Dodgers can move Teoscar's contract, that frees up financial resources. If they can be creative with how they structured Tatis's deal, using deferrals and incentives the way they did with Ohtani's contract, they can potentially fit another massive salary under the luxury tax threshold, or at least minimize the penalties. The Dodgers have become masters of financial engineering, finding ways to build super teams while still maintaining some level of fiscal responsibility. It's not easy, but they've proven it's possible. From a pure baseball standpoint, adding Tatis would give the Dodgers even more flexibility. Mookie Betts could potentially move back to the outfield, where his Gold Glove caliber defense would be a huge asset. Tatis would slide in at shortstop, bringing elite defense at a premium position along with that explosive offensive upside. Suddenly, you're looking at a lineup that features Ohtani, Betts, Freeman, Tatis, and Will Smith all hitting in some order. That's not just a murderer's row, that's an execution squad. That's the kind of lineup that strikes fear into opposing pitchers before the game even starts. But we have to pump the brakes just a little bit here and inject some reality into this conversation. As exciting as the Tatis rumors are, as much as insiders are buzzing about the Dodgers' interest, we have to acknowledge that pulling off a deal like this would be extraordinarily complicated. First, you have to convince the San Diego Padres to trade their franchise player, their face of the organization, their most marketable star. That's a monumentally difficult task under any circumstances, and it becomes even harder when you're talking about trading him to your biggest rival in the division. The Padres would have to be blown away by the return package. We're talking about multiple top prospects, maybe even some major league talent, and quite possibly taking on some salary commitment in return. The Dodgers would essentially have to offer a haul so massive that San Diego couldn't say no, and even then, the Padres might decide that keeping Tatis is more valuable than any collection of assets they could get back. Franchise players don't get traded very often, especially not young ones who are still in their prime and under team control. There's also the question of whether Tatis himself would want to go to Los Angeles. Yes, the Dodgers are a championship organization with unlimited resources and a track record of winning. But leaving San Diego, where he's already established himself as the face of the franchise, would be a significant decision. Players have input into these situations, especially stars of his caliber, and Tatis would have to be on board with the move for it to happen. And then there's the public relations angle. Can you imagine the reaction in San Diego if the Padres traded Tatis to the Dodgers? The fan base would absolutely riot. The backlash would be nuclear. The organization would face intense criticism for years, maybe decades. That's not something ownership takes lightly, and it could be enough to kill any deal before it even gets serious traction, no matter how good the offer is. So where does that leave us? We have the Dodgers potentially preparing this mega offer, positioning themselves financially and roster-wise to make a run at one of baseball's biggest stars. We have Teoscar Hernandez suddenly appearing in trade rumors, which could be connected to clearing space for a massive acquisition. We have the winter meetings coming up in just a few days, where deals could be finalized and the baseball landscape could shift dramatically. And we have Fernando Tatis Jr., the talented, controversial, electrifying superstar at the center of it all. The truth is, nobody outside of those front offices knows exactly what's going to happen. These are the kinds of moves that get negotiated in complete secrecy, where even the slightest leak can derail months of careful planning. But the fact that we're even having this conversation, the fact that multiple sources are confirming the Dodgers' interest, tells you that something is definitely brewing behind the scenes. Whether it actually comes to fruition remains to be seen, but the mere possibility is enough to send shockwaves through the entire sport. Think about what it would mean if the Dodgers actually pulled this off. You'd have arguably the three best position players in baseball, Ohtani, Betts, and Tatis, all on the same team, you'd have a collection of talent that might be unprecedented in the modern era. Other teams would essentially be playing for second place before the season even started. The competitive balance of the National League would be completely shattered, and the Dodgers would cement themselves as not just a dynasty, but perhaps the greatest roster ever assembled in baseball history. Of course, there's risk involved too. Tatis has dealt with injuries. He's faced controversy, including a suspension for performance-enhancing drugs. He's still relatively young and hasn't proven he can stay healthy for a full season consistently. Betting hundreds of millions of dollars on any player is risky, but betting that kind of money on someone with question marks is even riskier. The Dodgers would have to be absolutely convinced that Tatis's upside outweighs the potential downside, and that's not a decision they would make lightly. But if there's any organization equipped to handle that kind of risk, it's the Dodgers. They have the medical staff to keep players healthy. They have the player development infrastructure to maximize talent. They have the financial resources to absorb a bad contract if things go wrong. And most importantly, they have the championship pedigree and organizational culture that attracts elite players and helps them thrive. Tatis in a Dodger uniform, surrounded by that level of talent and supported by that kind of organization, could potentially reach heights we've never seen before. The flip side of all this is what it means for teams like the Padres and the rest of the National League West. If San Diego were to trade Tatis to Los Angeles, it would essentially be waving the white flag on competing in the division for the foreseeable future. It would signal a rebuild or at least a significant step back. Other teams in the division like the Diamondbacks, Giants, and Rockies are already facing an uphill battle trying to compete with the Dodgers' resources and talent. Adding Tatis would make that mountain essentially unclimbable. From a league-wide perspective, you have to wonder if this is good for baseball. Yes, super teams create excitement and drive ratings. Watching elite talent all on one roster is undeniably compelling. But when one team becomes so dominant that the outcome feels predetermined, does that hurt competitive balance? Do fans in other cities lose interest when their teams have no realistic shot at competing? These are questions that Major League Baseball has been grappling with for years, and a potential Tatis to the Dodgers move would only intensify that debate. But let's bring this back to the fans, because ultimately they're the ones who make this sport what it is. For Dodger fans, the possibility of adding Fernando Tatis Jr. is the stuff that dreams are made of. Imagine watching him and Mookie Betts turn double plays. Imagine seeing him and Freddie Freeman celebrating home runs together. Imagine the energy he would bring to an already electric clubhouse. It would be must-see television every single night, and Dodger Stadium would be absolutely rocking with that kind of star power on display. For Padres fans, this is a nightmare scenario. The thought of losing your franchise player, especially to your biggest rival, is almost too painful to contemplate. It would feel like betrayal. It would feel like ownership giving up on winning. It would create a rift between the fan base and the organization that could take years to heal. And watching Tatis thrive in Dodger blue while your team rebuilds would be salt in an already gaping wound. For fans of other teams around baseball, this would create a whole range of emotions. Some would be excited to see such a loaded roster and what they could accomplish. Others would be frustrated that their own teams can't or won't spend money the way the Dodgers do. Still others would roll their eyes and complain about competitive balance and how baseball is broken when one team can just buy all the best players. All of those reactions are valid, and all of them speak to how polarizing this potential move would be. As we head into these winter meetings, as executives and agents gather in Orlando to negotiate deals and reshape rosters, the Fernando Tatis Jr. situation will be the story everyone is watching. Every conversation, every reported meeting, every cryptic comment from insiders will be analyzed and dissected for clues about whether this mega offer is real and whether it has any chance of actually happening. The baseball world is holding its collective breath, waiting to see if the Dodgers are really going to try to pull off the impossible. And while we wait for answers, while we refresh Twitter and check baseball news sites obsessively for any update, we have to appreciate just how wild this all is. We're potentially witnessing history in the making. We're watching a franchise that has already dominated the sport for years try to reach even greater heights. We're seeing the limits of spending power and roster construction tested in ways we've never seen before. Whether you love it or hate it, Whether you think it's great for baseball or terrible for competitive balance, you can't deny that it's absolutely fascinating. The bottom line is this: the Los Angeles Dodgers are not content with simply being good. They're not satisfied with just winning championships. They want to be legendary. They want to build a roster that people will talk about for generations. And if the reports are true, if they're really preparing a mega offer for Fernando Tatis Jr., then they're willing to do whatever it takes to reach that goal. The money doesn't matter. The obstacles don't matter. The criticism doesn't matter. All that matters is winning, and winning big. So here's what I need from you right now. If you've made it this far into this video, if you're as invested in this story as I am, then I need you to smash that like button right now. Seriously, hit it as hard as Fernando Tatis crushes fastballs. That engagement helps the algorithm show this content to more people, and it helps us continue bringing you the latest breaking news and in-depth analysis about your Los Angeles Dodgers. Drop a comment below and tell me what you think. Do you want the Dodgers to go all in on Tatis? Is this the move that makes them unstoppable? Or is it too risky given his injury history and off-field issues? Should they trade Teoscar Hernandez to make room? Or is his presence too valuable to give up? I read every single comment and I genuinely